Thank you, Roz. As Roz mentioned, I've been here 28 years, and I think it is a supreme luxury to be at such an advanced stage in one's career and still be able to be as excited about a project as I am about this update of our long-range pedestrian bicycle plan. I'm really happy to see a good turnout on a holiday, including many faces who have worked with us on this project and its predecessors. But for those of you who may be coming to this a little bit new, I'm going to just give a bit of context for what we're doing here with this plan. HGAC is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for transportation activities in Harris and the surrounding 7 counties. And as a result, there is a Transportation Policy Council, which sits at this table once a month, that will be this Friday, hopefully, adopting our long-range regional transportation plan and this regional pedestrian and bicyclist plan. Now, what does that mean? Basically, the TPC is responsible for, among other things, allocating certain categories of federal and, to a lesser extent, state money for facilities here in this region, as well as, I think, being a leader in the policy discussion and coordination. So the significance of the plan I'm going to describe to you is that, by and large. Now, I recognize that for an audience of people who have come here likely on an off day to hear this presentation, I may not need to do a lot of sales on why it's important to invest in ped bike infrastructure, but I'm going to do it anyway, just because it feels appropriate. One of the reasons, some of those of you who've been with us in the ongoing dialogue about this recognize that I think there is a bit of a divide sometimes between the advocate and users community and sometimes others in the policy community who might view, in light of our congestion problems and constrained budgets, this sort of investment as a luxury that perhaps we can't really afford. So first off, I would like to do whatever I can to dispel that notion. One of the things when we think about competing for a skilled workforce in this century and beyond, where it's increasingly relying on knowledge workers who are footloose, for whom the lowest cost of housing may not be the primary determinant in where they want to live, is what kind of amenities do we offer as a region? And frankly, we don't have a Front Range. We don't have a Mount Hood or a Mount Shasta. You could argue that we've got some climate challenges versus some of these meccas that are viewed as the quality of life icons of America. What we do have, which I think is a bit of an untold story, is over 16,000 miles of streams, rivers, bayous, and coastline. What if we had a comprehensive network of bikeways and facilities that gave people even better access to that? How would that stack up in recruiting people from Seattle or Portland or San Francisco? By the way, flat is not necessarily bad from the viewpoint of a bicyclist either. The other one that I'll just point out to you, and somebody may be able to correct me if I'm forgetting one, I can't think of a single master plan community that has gone up since I've been here anyway, that hasn't had an extensive network of bikeways. Now, that's the private sector spending their own money on a luxury, or is that increasingly viewed as an essential component of a neighborhood that a for-profit business is trying to lure homeowners to? So I would just suggest if it's important for a developer who has to gain investors and financing and take an awful lot of risk on a project to outfit it with a bikeway system, why wouldn't local governments be equally concerned about that for existing communities? So economic development, we don't talk about it as much when we talk about transportation benefits of bicycling, but I think it's right in there front and center. Next one is health. Now, you know the old fattest city ratings, that actually didn't have any health data in it. So I'm not going to talk about our former presence at the top of that list. But we do lead the national average in both cardiovascular diseases and the rate of diabetes here in the region. And this is not from our region, but from an international study. But I think the idea of having better both sidewalks and bikeways everywhere is, rather than trying to impress upon people the importance of going to the gym or fruit instead of candy, people that have the opportunity to get a little bit of exercise, a few steps or a few pedals as part of their day-to-day activities are more likely to take other steps towards a healthier lifestyle. And I think even if there isn't a lot of traffic on the street, if it doesn't have any sidewalks, if our thoroughfares don't have any accommodations for bicyclists, it kind of sends a message to the residents that, well, this is not welcome here. It's not advisable under these circumstances. And we could argue that the depths of the psychological impact of that, but I don't think they're insignificant. I would also note that almost everyone I know who began seriously taking purpose trips on their bike, whether it be commuting or other errands, began as a recreational cyclist. And I think this is the hatchery, if you will, for the bike commuters of tomorrow. And I don't want to underestimate the transportation benefits. I think sometimes in the past we may have disappointed people because, well, we need to have more bikes and walk trips to reduce congestion or improve air quality, and then sometimes the numbers or the evidence of that doesn't look so great. So what I will say, though, is every trip that is taken on a bike or on foot is a trip not taken in a car, and whatever attendant pollution you might ascribe to that. So in the aggregate, regardless of if it's just going to school or a longer work trip, every little bit helps when we face the air pollution problems we do. On the congestion side of things, again, if we build out the whole plan I'm going to show you in a little bit, I don't think you're going to notice that on the Katy Freeway. Full disclosure. I think you very well might notice it, though, if you have young kids that you're dropping off at elementary school. Just notice the difference when you're going to work on a day when school is in session, when it's not. I don't have local statistics, but I've read that up to something like 40% of the AM peak is chauffeur or chauffeur-esque trips. What if we just focused on things like that, or parks? And then the final one is, of course, we have devoted an awful lot of our landscape to the temporary housing of cars during the day. I think we figured we all have about 7 parking spaces per car over the region. You can pack a lot more bikes onto a site and maintain grass. So I think, again, in places like schools and dense mixed-use areas, bikes can indeed be an increasingly important part of the transportation solution. So there, I've gone ahead and brought it up, bike commuting. I find it interesting that oftentimes in discussions there's a tendency to say, well, we don't want to compare ourselves to, fill in the blank, Austin, Portland, New York, none of those places are anything like us. I find it interesting to make those comparisons, though, and I'm going to show you just a few of them. Now, I'm shifting gears a little bit, so I want to give a full disclosure before I do. The data I'm going to show you is city-level data. It's not regional data. There's a reason for that, which I will get into in a minute. So we're going to be looking at Houston City, but you can, for those of you outside of the city, can kind of project mentally what this might look like in your area. So here are the top 5, and I'll just read across. That is from American Community Survey. These are people who reported themselves to be daily bike commuters. So it's ranked in terms of 2012 mode share. Bicycle-friendly status. This is the League of American Bicyclists certification program. And the reason I put this up here, and the reason I made this comparison city level, is I wanted to use that number because I didn't want to call all of their metropolitan planning organizations and find out what their budget for bikeway facilities was. So I'm just going to say, if you'll bear with me, that this status level, which is sort of like for LEED or these other certifications, is a good proxy for the amount of local investment in bike infrastructure. And then the last column is showing the growth in bicycle commuting share in that city from 1990 to 2012. The takeaway I have from this slide is nobody got a big share of bicycle commuters who didn't invest some money in it. And it's a little bit of a leap of faith. I know, what if you build it and they don't come? Well, I would submit to you that of these top 5 cities, all of those produced pretty good results, pretty dramatic growth. It wasn't like there was something congenital in Portland, apparently, that they were having huge shares of bike commuting back in the 90s. I think we can attribute that to investment in their network program. Now, when I show a list like this, I can imagine some people's eye rolls immediately. Well, those are hipster meccas, and the weather's better and different culturally. And I'll offer that for Portland. Could be true. Weather, Minneapolis, I think it gets kind of cold up there. I'm not sure about that. It gets kind of hot in D.C. In the summer. I've been there anyway when it was. Maybe we'll set aside Seattle and San Francisco, but I think significant gains have been seen in places that have invested in the infrastructure. Well, let's maybe have a little more realistic comparison. So I thought, well, who would be, I've mislabeled the slide, I'm sorry. These would be our top 5 peers. Hot, sprawling, Sunbelt cities. How do we do compared to them? Interesting, New Orleans, doing pretty good. Austin, you might expect. Tampa, I don't know. They don't have a LAB status and have a pretty good share. Miami. Phoenix, you'll note the big drop there. I'm a little bit suspect about these numbers because some of them fluctuate quite a bit with the survey samples. That may be an outlier. I don't know. And then again, there is Houston with a pretty stable share, even though the city recently achieved bronze status. So work with me a little bit on this thought exercise. You think we could get up to Phoenix's share? How many in this room think we could get up to 0.7% a day? Nobody? Okay. Maybe a third of you, okay. Anybody think we could get up to Austin? Get up to Austin share, okay, maybe a fourth. Anybody think we could get up to New Orleans? Okay, picking up some steam. So I don't know that these numbers, and we don't include specific benchmarks in our plan, but I don't know that it would be an entirely bad thing to start thinking about what is that benchmark that Houston and the region should ascribe to, and then we can start doing some cost benefits. What is the emissions reduction? What would be the parking space reduction? And then inversely, what would be the cost? What would be the elements we would need to undertake? Just seems to focus the mind quite a bit better, my mind anyway. And just for the heck of it, what if that would start to be a noticeable number? Now, I want to talk, before we leave that just entirely, about heat. Some of you may be aware that HGAC has partnered with the City of Houston on 2 permanent counters. They're both on the White Oak Trail, one at 5th Street and one at 34th Street. We're working to get some more of those deployed throughout the region, but I think this is very interesting and the first time that we've really had good data on the usage of these facilities. And I want to just point something out to you. On August 2nd, which is a Saturday, we hit almost 1,100, and this is just bikes, that the sensor can distinguish between bikes and peds. Almost 1,100 users of that facility August 2nd. So I thought, I'm going to go ahead and look up what the temperature was on August 2nd just to make sure there wasn't something going on. And guess what? It was unseasonably cool that day. The high was 83 degrees. So yeah, sure, that's a lot of people going to come out and ride a bike. I just thought for fun, though, I would look at August 9th, which was down about 200, 250 off of that peak. August 9th was a high of 94 degrees. I didn't look at the humidity. So a fair amount of people, and by the way, the profile of riders skews towards the afternoon, so we can assume many of those were afternoon riders, got out on a day in August, 800, 94 degrees. I would submit to you that when there are quality facilities that provide, that's a dense residential area, the Heights, residents easy access to attractive destinations, we have evidence that they will ride in 94 degrees in a pretty good number. So we were looking forward to deploying more of these counters throughout. So I always like to relate to the local. You know, it's easy, well, not easy. When we talk about transportation networks and we look at these big regional maps, sometimes that doesn't apply, at least in my mind, to some of the nuances of what we need to do to make this more bike-friendly region. So, and I view myself as perhaps the type of person who might be swayed into becoming a bike commuter. I've done it a few times. I will confess I'm not a regular at it. So kind of looking at it through the eyes of a possible convert, what would I need to be more inclined to do that? I live about 3 blocks off of the Braeswood Trail, which I think is, it's not quite there yet. You see some patching, but has the potential to really be a phenomenal trail and trail system if you can get to it. That is the bridge on Stell Link by my house. I'm sorry, the picture is a bit washed out, but you see there's no bike lane, very narrow sidewalk, very low guardrail with a drop into a channelized bayou. Right here is where the bikes are to cross. There's no markings, there's no crosswalk. These things are not really aligned. And so when we talk about designing bikeways and facilities, that integration with the local street network is absolutely crucial. It's not just enough to lay asphalt or concrete in the floodway. It's really understanding how that connects to destinations. So I can actually, if I want to commute to work, take some parallel routes on lesser traveled streets. One of the problems in doing that in my neighborhood is that none of them go all the way through. We have a lot of discontinuous street designs, even in older parts of the city, which are largely gridded, where we've closed streets. Sometimes a freeway is a barrier. Sometimes we've put barriers in streets to reduce cut-through traffic. From the cyclist perspective, though, that adds can add a lot of distance and discomfort to the trip. Moving on up towards our building, and I know the city is embarking on a revision of their bikeway plan as well. Moving up Wesleyan Street, some of it's bike lane, some of it's signed route. That is, I didn't have a picture with a bike in it, but that is the distance you have clearance if you don't want to go 2 miles out of your way to the next bike lane to ride up Wesleyan. That's a bit dark, but that is, the bike lane does go under 59 to the office. That can be kind of an intimidating experience for less than a super confident bicyclist, and there's often some materials in that lane. and then we get up to the rest of Westland. And you see, and I know the city is going to be doing maintenance and restriping and whatnot based on the upcoming plan. But the conditions today are not conducive to staying in that lane by any means. There's some potholes and debris and problems, and so even though it's there and you can see a little bit of the striping, it doesn't make for the most comfortable and pleasant trip. I think fixing any of those things in the slides I showed you, obviously there would be a cost to all of that. I don't know that it would be a prohibitive cost, and hopefully could be achieved during routine maintenance. I wish I would have taken a picture that one day our bike rack here at HJC was full. I bet if I went down there now it would be fuller than that. But the other key is just like having a parking space for your car. If you do ride your bike, is there a bike rack, possibly showers, or does your employer in other ways incentivize you to ride your bike like they do here to drive with the parking that's provided? So I just want to give you that background as we talk about what we're trying to do in achieving this regional system. I think the actions we're trying to cause in this plan, forgive my little eights mnemonic device, but certainly we want to facilitate. HGAC doesn't plan anybody's local bikeway system. What I think we can do, though, is build a vision that people can work towards together. A lot of places do not have a lot of staff dedicated to this activity, so we can build and add capacity to them. I mentioned data a little bit. I think that's the thing we can share, and then awareness building. Then I think as far as our investments in facilities, we really want to reward those places that are making their own local investment, doing their own planning, some more examples of that. At the same time, I think there are places where investments in pilot projects, maybe where there isn't a great history of these sorts of facilities, similarly can be a catalyst to more local action. And then finally, I think this plan creates an opportunity for us to, in more systematic ways, cooperate, coordinate, collect facilities, and hopefully institutionalize, and that's in the good sense of that word, us taking a look at ped bike facilities while we're looking at other transportation projects. I think the biggest new thing about the plan is that we have proposed a high-level conceptual system of regional bikeways. Now, every time I show this map, I need to add a disclaimer. This is no specific alignment. This is no implicit or explicit commitment of funding to any of these facilities. But what we sought to do is connect those places that have developed localized systems, particularly with some of our region's most prominent recreational areas, either existing or potentially. And where exactly or how these facilities would be developed would be worked out over time. There may be off-road corridors available if it is along the course of a waterway of some sort. Maybe there's right-of-ways or other easements that could be used. In some cases where there are lower volume roads in rural areas, maybe that could be a assigned shoulder, a wider shoulder. Works pretty well in a lot of other parts of the country. We did just back of the envelope cost estimate of this, and just using multipliers, not engineering studies. We think it would be about 1,200 miles, this network. We think it could be built for a little over $400 million. Now, that's a lot of money. I understand that. I think the 29610 interchange is about $300 million. Might be up a little bit. Katy Freeway, I think, finished up at about $2.8 billion. So I'm not saying $400 million or any investment in bikeways is not something we'd have to come up with. The point I make is even in our dire financial situations, we're spending money in that increment all the time. This could be achieved over 30 years if it is a priority and we put some disciplined investment into it, particularly when facilities are going to be rehabbed or otherwise upgraded. So we think getting this concept out there is important, but it's also very important. We left these local networks vague because otherwise it kind of becomes I've heard it termed as a spaghetti bowl map. But figuring out exactly where these longer facilities would feather in and integrate to these local networks is very important. And a thing I think we've done a better job on in this plan than any of the other ones I've worked on is really getting a handle on what those local networks are, both existing and planned facilities. Again, I show this picture just to help any disbelievers whose this belief might need to be suspended. We are getting close to, and this is before the city has even started their new plan, I think having a very good integrated network of facilities in the core of Houston that will link up to transit, link up to key destinations. We have numerous excellent local facilities in our master plan communities, but the problem is, by and large, they don't really connect to anything else. So you can get around Kingwood and in fact go over to Atascocita on bikeways, but if I'm not sure what that proposed facility is. But if you wanted to make a longer trip outside of that community, it can be daunting. West Houston, I think, is kind of another untold story. I think increasingly, particularly with the energy corridor, providing employees access to the growing trail network out there, as well as their homes, is really seen as a recruiting benefit for those companies. We could do even more in building out that system. Sugar Land, this is a very interesting example to me, because I think it shows the problem when we talk about, well, why aren't these counts on facilities higher? When we count traffic, we do a lot of that all the time and have been doing it for years. But what's the difference about the road network than this network? It's a network. A lot of our communities, despite their investments and good intentions, this is not a network. This is kind of a grab bag of facilities. And I think unless and until we can actually start linking more of those up, we won't really know the potential. That's why I think Portland and some of those other places had such phenomenal growth in their facilities. It takes a long time of doing a lot of individual projects, and I'm lauding Sugar Land, I'm not criticizing them. I'm sure these projects made the most sense for where they are today. Where it will get them tomorrow, we'll see how much of that could be connected up. I spent so much time on these maps, though, because I think that is a key component of the plan. Like I said, we're not in the business of debating where any of this should be in a local government, but it's very important that TxDOT, toll road, counties, and other entities know what the local plans are. Because if there are upgrades or changes to any facilities that cross this, they should be aware. Certainly if there's an existing bikeway, but also is there a planned one? And can we make, when a project is still in the planning stage, a better accommodation so we don't unintentionally create a barrier of the kind I showed you in the earlier slide. And then the final thing, looping back to my own commuter journey, is I think we are really going to have to figure out a way to do a better job on what I would characterize as last mile issues. Again, how many of you have ridden on the Braeswood Trail? Okay. How many of you have tried to get up into the Texas Medical Center from the Braeswood Trail? Okay. I think those of you who raise your hands to both know the point I'm making here. It's not enough just to get you close. We have to figure out a way to get you in to where you're going, just as we have a driveway for a car, and that there's be some safety and facilities to accommodate you when you arrive. One thing that we have done to try to help with that is we've conducted now 18 livable center studies. These are much more small area urban design studies, focused a bit more on pedestrian than bicycle. That's in the red map, and then in the blue dot, or the red dot rather, the blue dot are what we call pedestrian bicyclist special districts. These are areas a little bit larger than a quote livable center, but still where we might do more of a comprehensive look at on and off street bikeways. We've done 9 of those studies. We also have been increasingly incorporating multimodal considerations in all of HGAC's sub-regional planning initiatives. West Houston study is one that is wrapping up right now, that has got an extensive bikeways component in it. So we really want this broader vision plan to then link back up with local plans. By the way, it doesn't have to be one of our studies. We want to work with cities, though, that have done their own planning, put some of their own dollars into it, and their policies are already aligned with this before we put our money into it. One of the things that we really tried to do this time in the plan also is make our policy council, who will vote funding on any of this, with a much clearer idea of what we're looking for in terms of a regional investment in a pedestrian or bicycle facility. I used to joke that to me, especially with pedestrian, a regional facility is an oxymoron. I mean, we don't really have a lot of people walking across the region. We don't really have that many people making very long bike trips. So to me, it's more the quantity. Are we doing enough of these? And are we doing them in the right places? And are we putting money into the right kind of projects? So I'm going to give you some examples of these. This was privately funded, but I think it's a great example of the kind of thing that HGAC could invest in. You've got the Braze facility I talked about before. That's combination with the flood control district, with precinct 1, connects into local city bikeways. A lot of different actors in. TxDOT's been involved in some of that. If we can come in and erect a connection that adds value to all these other local investments, especially if it's a difficult thing, an expensive thing like a bridge, I think that's, to me, a good example of a regional project, maybe the best we have. Last mile issues. How many of you have ridden the MKT trail? I'm sorry, that's Miss MKT trail, but we're showing downtown. How many of you have ridden Columbia Tap into downtown? I guess I could ask how many of you have ridden the MKT trail almost to downtown. Yes. So again, providing those direct connections, not just the bridge in this case, but how do you safely get off of those longer trip facilities into where you work or to where you're going to conduct another errand. I think that's the key. Implicit in all of this is, do we have opportunities to improve safety? This is a project that emanated from one of our PedBike Special District studies, flea markets on North Airline Drive. Again, in a city with no zoning, changing land use. I'm not faulting any street designer on this. I don't think it was ever considered when these streets were designed that there would be the levels of pedestrian traffic that they now have. But whether or not it's in the book like it should be, the people are there now. It's an active safety concern. So how can we address hotspots, places where through no fault of the local government land use or conditions have changed? Now we've got a safety problem to deal with. I think that's a great example. Realizing local plans. How many of you have been over on Navigation Boulevard lately? Okay, great. Great audience knows. So recognize that these things didn't just happen overnight. East End was our very first partner in livable center studies. They've been very strategic and intentional, systematic in pursuing funding from HGAC, federal grants, private sources, and you're starting to see, I think, a critical mass of facilities occurring that, again, communicate to residents and visitors of the East End that this is a little different. We want a little bit different kind of place here. I think it's only a matter of time until you see new investment responding to that. And then finally, irrespective of whether it's, quote, called a bikeway or a pedestrian improvement, we want to support those projects that integrate all modes into their design from the beginning. Again, this is Bagby Street in Houston, but I think it's a good example of how we could make many of our transportation projects really be a delightful place to be, as well as hopefully maintain good vehicle circulation and high safety. So that is, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do with the plan. I am trying to promote sustainability by not printing out many copies of it, but you can look at the plan in its entirety at that web address. And again, we're hoping that our Policy Council will adopt it this Friday. And I thank you for your attention. And I'd be happy to take any questions or have a conversation on what you all see as some of the ways we can get our bicycling up in this region. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Mary Closer, and I work with Houston. I just want to say Jeff has one really wonderful presentation, so thanks for that. But also to ask, so to get it adopted this Friday, is there anything particular that would be helpful? I think there's lots of good ideas, and funding is going to continue to be. So what would be helpful for you in that regard?
Well, I always think it's helpful if citizens express their views to elected officials, either if you wanted to contact Policy Council members individually or make a public comment during the meeting. And I guess just from my perspective, it's also very nice when that can be expressed in an affirmative way. So if you would feel so compelled to congratulate them for this draft product and encourage their support, I think that would be well received. Had another question down. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the problems that I've seen because I was involved with the Houston Regional Plan in the early 90s, and to me, I know Houston for a fact has been overly dependent on federal money, with usually a 20% local match, and the rest federal, which is where you guys come in most of the time because you're the MPO. But how can we get local governments to be more motivated to do projects on their own and not rely on federal money? I know Minneapolis has a vast network of bike trails, and a lot of it was on their own dime. They didn't have to go through all the federal processes, which takes years, and a lot of times it never ends up being built, which is what happened in Houston. Our local original budget for 345 miles of bikeways was like $45 million with a $9 million local match. Well, the budget was way off. Houston was responsible for everything over budget. So our local expense ended up being way more than even the $45 billion total budget. Now, if we'd have done it on our own, we could have had a big network in the 90s, and a lot of it never even got built.
Right. I think that is a great point, and I want to give a acknowledgement to the TPC. I know we've had some concerns about the amount of funding that they've provided for these activities over the years. Some of you may have expressed those concerns, but I was just looking up either built or program projects. We've put about $120 million in the past 10 years, and we have calculated, I think, local investments of about $80 million during that time. So what you say is accurate. I think there's been a perception in some quarters like, well, we've got our hands full with regular congestion and maintenance, so we'll try to get some other money to do this kind of stuff. I think that one of the things we tried to emphasize in our priorities for the plan is we'd like to reward those places that are helping themselves, where we can catalyze those investments significantly. So I think you'll maybe see that over time. And I know we have at least one chief elected official here today, so I don't want to speak for elected officials' perspective. But I go back to that picture of Cross Creek Ranch. If developers are putting their own money into this because they're trying to make money, I don't know why, for some reason, cities don't view it as an equally important amenity. So that could just be an awareness raising. And then I would just say, well, I don't want to borrow too much from Michael Payne with Bike Houston, but he talks about our relative levels of advocacy compared to other places. I think elected officials need to hear from you all if this is a priority, and have a frank discussion of, well, you know, there's sort of a finite amount of budget. What's a reasonable amount for this, and where would the priorities be? I'm kind of a believer that once you get consensus that something is a priority, and I don't want to undermine the fiscal challenge, it seems like people can almost always find money, talking government-wise, to do things that everybody agrees are a big priority. So I think that's the key, is getting that consensus in at the local level. And my guess is that we could find funding to do maybe some more than we thought. Another great example that I heard somebody say is that, you know, it's just anytime you can piggyback, you know, maybe there's some street reconstruction that's already going on. Maybe the school district is doing something at the school. For those of you in the metro service area, maybe they're fixing something up. If we've got a good plan out there, you know, maybe some of that could be paid for, you know, many hands lighten the load. Some elements of these improvements could be made by other entities than just the local government. And how many of you heard Houston Matters last Thursday? Okay. There was a caller on that show who was talking about bicycle registrations. I'd never heard of that idea before, but I think it all ought to be on the table. Maybe there's some different ways we could finance facilities. Maybe we could involve more private financing. We've got a lot of pretty big facilities that have been paid for by private individuals and foundations in the region. Yes, sir.
Yeah, great presentation. It was a great overview of the plan, and I look forward to attending the policy council meeting on Friday. I've only lived in Houston for 3 years, but it certainly seems like there's been a change in attitudes, or at least a change in perception. I just wanted you to maybe speak a little bit if you see a change, at least in this community over time, for a greater preference towards bike and pedestrians.
Well, again, my observations would be primarily anecdotal, but yes, just around my neighborhood, which I think is probably a decent surrogate since we've got a big trail there. I'd just eyeball it as 2- or 3-fold from maybe when we did the last plan in 2007. I don't think that's unusual, because I think that it definitely is an additive effect. Just visually seeing larger groups of cyclists, I think, has an inspirational effect on others to perhaps try it. Similarly, there's hard data on that safety actually improves because motorists, you know, if you see a bicyclist on your ride to work maybe once every 2 weeks, you're not looking for them as much as if you see 2 or 3 a day. Well, if safety improves, and I think the motivation improves. And finally, and I think most importantly, that pool of advocates grows. Until I started riding more, I actually was involved back in the late 90s in our bike plan update when I wasn't really riding too much at all, and so I was taking in a lot of feedback I got from regular users. You really have to be out there a little bit to understand what some of these issues are, particularly the niceties of maintenance and seams and grates and potholes and the importance that has on your experience. The more people we have doing that who can relate it directly to elected officials, I think we'll continue to build. So I think our momentum is very, very strong. And I think we'll see that 0.4% go up irrespective. But I also think we could supercharge that some more with some of the investments we're talking about in this plan.
I remember hearing Houston Matters legislation, and part of the discussion was incentivizing bike registrations by giving back a reflective vest or a headlamp or something that had value instead of this penalizing feeling that Houston bike registration has. So that was a great idea.
Yeah.
And to me, that talked about ways that stakeholders could start thinking creatively about being involved in helping fund and being okay with that.
Right. I thank you for clarifying that, because I failed to mention that part. And you mentioned helping fund, and immediately I was thinking of crowdfunding. I think not just with bikes, we're going to, in all sorts of public infrastructure, I think have, I don't know, revolution might be a bit strong, certainly an evolution in how we think about paying for things. The notion that I've heard expressed at times that, well, the quote cycling community is small and has a voice, that's bigger than its numbers, and hence we shouldn't. You've heard these arguments before. I think it would be really interesting, even just as a gauge, to have some sort of a crowdfunding campaign and just see what it looked like, and people might be pretty surprised. I don't know. Let's see. Amar, and then, yeah.
Jeff, based on the submissions that you received for the tip golfer project, do you know how much funding was requested versus how much is allocated for this year? It would be a good number for this group too, if you're aware of it.
I do not know. I will ask Thomas, who's here.
I do not know. I'd have to check with David Wardlow if he's out today.
Okay. I don't know. I do know that we had I think if not a record, a very high number of submittals. So, interestingly enough, in the last, and what's being referred to here is called the TIP, or our Transportation Improvement Program. That's where we actually assign federal dollars to specific projects. HGAC actually funded all the PED bike requests that came in the last time we updated the TIP. So part of it is not just our putting money out there, it's local demand. And I think some of the things you brought up have really kind of turned people off on the federal process, looking at both the red tape and some of the cost requirements that are there. So we'll have to see. But I think we can all learn together and improve that experience for local governments too. Okay, next.
I also heard that Houston Matters show, and I thought that was a great suggestion on the bicycle registration. Houston actually did have bicycle registration from like the late 1960s to about 5 years ago. City Council did not recognize any benefit to it. It was $2 to register your bike, and originally the money was supposed to go towards construction of bike trails. Well, you can't build very many bike trails even back then for $2 a bike. But the big benefit that I do know people who had their bikes stolen and recovered because they were registered at the city. So, that's another benefit I can see to the registration of bicycles, in addition to getting some other incentives. Back to the funding, Houston, now that Mayor Parker has signed into law or whatever, for areas for complete streets. I think that's, as long as it follows through, that idea is really what we need to go with, because it really costs, relative to just including bikes and pedestrians in a street design when you rebuild a street like you're talking about, That's a whole lot cheaper than building bicycle-specific facilities. And it can be done on a regular basis as the infrastructure's rebuilt and at a lot cheaper cost. And you know, bike trails can't get you everywhere you want to go, but if you have a complete street system that can do that, even if they're not marked bikeways, they're safer for everybody to use. I think that more people would ride.
We're going to have time for one more question, then we're going to have to wrap it up.
It's wondering, really. Is Metro tracking the number of bicycle boardings?
Yes.
And is it going up?
Yes. I didn't include those, but we get a report, and Andrew, you may know. Unfortunately, we got to be out of here in about 5 minutes, so 2 minutes. So any of those of you who want to continue the conversation, where should you'll tell them where to go?
Yes, for you all that want to continue asking Jeff questions, you all can just flow into this room behind us. But before you go, I wanted to let you know that this presentation was videotaped, and it will be online in a couple of days. I'm going to send out an email. So if you have not signed your name on the sign-in sheet, please leave me your email address so that I can send you the link. For those of you who have friends who could not be here today, you can tell them that it's videotaped and they can see it online.
Thank you all. Great discussion.